Auspicious blessings to all. Last session, we talked about faith and reflected on our personal understanding and interpretation of it. We also learned that faith is inspired by the seeking of truth that leads one out of the vices of dissatisfaction and suffering and leads one to sustained happiness. We also learned that not all truth leads one to the quintessential state of sustained happiness and inner peace. The Buddhist understanding of faith is one based on rational investigation and personal verification, inspired by trust in the omniscient Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the teachings and truth, and the Sangha as the harmonious community who serve as our spiritual guides. This session is centered on arriving at an understanding of the core objects of faith in Buddhism, the Triple Gem, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We also will cover why refuge is necessary and what it takes to become Buddhist. Venerable Master Xing Yun explains that the Triple Gem are a spiritual wealth that transcends all worldly wealth, as they collectively lead us out of the vices of suffering and dissatisfaction. Whereby worldly wealth may buy us all the luxuries of the world, they are unable to bring us eternal joy, for they themselves are impermanent. The Triple Gem are very different in this sense. They guide us on a path towards freedom from suffering and eternal peace and joy. Sakyamuni Buddha is the founder of Buddhism, and Dharma is the universal truth of reality realized by the Buddha, and Sangha, the Buddhist community of monks and nuns, are the teachers. Parables in the sutras refer to the Buddha as a good doctor, the Dharma as the wondrous cure, and Sangha as the nurses or carers. Only when we have all three can a patient be healed. Likewise, in life, only by relying on the power of the Triple Gem can one be protected from danger and suffering and obtain happiness. Only then can one be at perfect ease and find liberation. As for the process of going for refuge, take the analogy of registering for courses at the tertiary level. Taking refuge is just like gaining admission into college as a freshman. Once formally registered as a student at college, one may begin enrolling in first-year courses, and upon successful completion of first-year courses, slowly transition into the second year of college, and so on. Approaching the Dharma without taking refuge is like auditing individual courses without enrolling in them. Even though one may audit a course for an entire semester, one is unable to receive credits for the course. As simple as this act of refuge may seem, it is based upon this initial act that true and sustained faith towards the path to liberation is established, and subsequent accomplishments on the path made possible. This session gives treatment to the need for refuge, the objects of refuge, the tiered understanding of the Triple Gem, erroneous understandings of the Triple Gem, and analogies which help portray the function and essence of the Triple Gem. Taking refuge in the Triple Gem, or Triratna in Sanskrit, is the first step in entering the gateway of the Buddha's teachings. Here, the word refuge may raise questions. Refuge denotes a need for protection from danger. However, for most individuals in the 21st century, there is no immediate threat to one's well-being. And because of this, when all is smooth sailing, one may dismiss the need for refuge and consider going for refuge as superfluous. To understand the need for refuge, one must first understand one's position. May we take a moment to reflect on some questions. Is there anything outside of ourselves that can provide lasting happiness and freedom from suffering? Do you think suffering is an external force or internal phenomenon? Where can we find lasting peace and happiness? These are questions that I'd like you to think about as we continue with this session. As far as the human condition is concerned, an unenlightened person only sees the tip of the iceberg and fails to comprehend the entirety of human existence. Owing to one's delusion, one fails to see all the causes and conditions that operate behind the scenes to create what we conventionally understand as human life and the sense of suffering. Just like a frog slowly cooking in warm water, not realizing the imminent danger it is in, we fail to notice the perilous situation we are in ourselves. Broadly speaking, we can categorize such danger into present external dangers, present internal dangers, and dangers beyond the present. From the Buddhist perspective, the way we view the world is distorted by subconscious tendencies based on erroneous understandings of self, or I. Viewing the self as more substantial and concrete than it really is, we tend to base our decisions on what we think is fit for this sense of self. So when our jobs, families, and social lives are stable, we tend to believe that all is well. We become overly complacent, oblivious to the underlying cause of dissatisfaction and suffering. We fail to realize that everything in life is impermanent. And as for external dangers, natural disasters, crime, accidents, and illness may take away everything that we have in an instant. Politics, social unrest, and violence may cause us pains in many ways never imagined. We only need to watch the news to be reminded of the uncertainty of life. If we stop for a moment and reflect on our life, there is never a time when our lives are perfect. Something is always going on, and suffering is ongoing. Sometimes the decisions that we make also induce suffering. It is only because we become desensitized to such suffering that we forget its presence. On a more global perspective, the imminence of birth, age, sickness, and death awaits us all. These dangers relate to our everyday existence. As for internal dangers, there is the factor of subjective world experience. Our subjective worlds are the culmination of physical, verbal, and mental processes, experiences, and habituations, as well as the underlying erroneous understanding of ego, which conditions our current worldview. Faced with the uncertainty of life, we react with anxiety and fear, albeit less for those who align their minds and actions to the path of morality, meditation, and wisdom, and who understand the cause of such anxiety. The suffering that one experiences should be seen not as the fundamental problem itself, but a symptom of a greater issue inherent in all sentient beings. Our underlying erroneous understanding of ego causes us to view the world based on false claims of ownership and authority over phenomena that ultimately is not in our direct control. We live on a set of preconceptions, expectations, and values conveniently aligned with one's interests that demand the world to conform to one's wishes. Whenever these expectations are not met, we give rise to afflictions. In some situations where we can tentatively change the way things are, those things themselves are subject to change, and when situations change, we are further afflicted by the loss of what we had wished for. Our actions and reactions to external phenomena make up our subjective experience, and only with refuge in the mind of equanimity, or in more specific terms, the mind of enlightenment, are we able to find true peace and freedom from suffering. As for the dangers beyond the present, such suffering caused by our subjective experiences do not end at death. According to the Buddhist worldview, sentient beings are trapped in samsara, or the cyclic existence put in motion by the karma we create. There are two main karmas, or types of karma, wholesome and unwholesome. So wholesome karma entails deeds of kindness, compassion, generosity, morality, and so forth. And the sustained upholding of such virtues lead to higher rebirths, particularly in the human and deva realm. Whereas with unwholesome karma, it entails actions inspired by greed, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, and so on. And this type of karma leads to rebirth in the lower realms of suffering, that of hell, animal, hungry ghost, and asura, or demigod. So just like this, due to the karma we heedlessly accumulate, we cycle through the different planes of existence indefinitely. And lost in samsara, we seldom can distinguish wholesome from unwholesome, right from wrong, and suffering becomes perpetual. To revisit the need for refuge, in our lives, there are external dangers conducive of suffering, internal dangers that create suffering, and dangers beyond the present put in motion by the karma we create. Without the wisdom of the Dharma, it is difficult to see things as they really are, and trapped in the darkness of delusion, we perpetuate suffering by grasping onto our egos and the preconceptions we hold on to so dearly. And as such, it is important that we seek refuge in that which protects us from the delusions of our own minds. To be considered a worthy object of refuge, the refuge itself needs to be eternally beyond and devoid of the sufferings of human existence and capable of leading others out of suffering. Moreover, the object of refuge must be accessible to the multitude equally without discrimination. In other words, this sense of protection and safety from the dangers of samsaric existence must be reachable for it to be considered a worthy refuge. The Buddha was born a human being. He lived as a human being and became enlightened as a human being. And after enlightenment, the Buddha was truly free of suffering. Prior to parinirvana, or the final relinquishment of residual karma leading to the death of the physical body once and for all, the Buddha was still subject to the physical ailments of human existence. However, his mind had long transcended the delusions and afflictions pestering the unenlightened. He was well beyond mental suffering, and nothing moved his mind, for he had already clearly seen the truth of reality. And note here that suffering is different from physical pain. One can be in pain but not suffer at all. And from this we see that suffering is nothing but a mental response triggered by our self-perpetuating ego. This very human side of the Buddha inspires in us faith in the potentiality for all to become Buddhas. The Dharma, as we soon learn, offers a way for all beings to find liberation from all forms of suffering and find eternal peace and joy. The practice of the Dharma leads to benefits in the present life and protects us from the dangers pertinent to this world. The Sangha are the manifestations of the Dharma, those who uphold the pure precepts and serve as the teachers and role models for all of us. Let us take time to get to know each object of refuge. It is essential for us to come to understand the Buddha's life and orientate ourselves with the context in which the Buddha taught the Dharma, for us to better understand how Buddha and the Dharma relate to us. With this context in mind, we soon realize that the problems of human existence prevalent during the time of the Buddha are just as relevant as they are today. The Buddha did not invent or create the Dharma. Rather, he awakened to the timeless universal truth of reality, relying on his omniscient wisdom, and shared with humanity the realized truths that lead to freedom from suffering and brings about sustained joy. This is the reason Buddhism continues to be relevant in the 21st century. This following short clip accounts for the important aspects of the Buddha's life. Please sit back and enjoy.
For 49 years, the Buddha of the world journeyed barefoot along the shores of the Ganges. He led us in the learning of the way to liberation, guiding us through the darkness like a path of light. The Buddha was born a prince of the Sakya clan and was named Siddhartha. At birth, a sage predicted that he would grow up to become a great holy king who would unify the world. As the future ruler of the Sakya clan, Prince Siddhartha lived a luxurious life of comfort and pleasure in the palace. However, in search of the great way of liberation, to save all sentient beings from the cycle of birth and death, Siddhartha left the palace on a white horse. He came to a forest at the foot of the snowy mountains, and there he practiced asceticism. For 6 long years, Siddhartha endured every form of ascetic practices until he finally realized that the middle path was the answer. Cultivation is like playing a musical string instrument. The string will snap if it is too tight, or not make any sound if it is too loose. Indulgence in sensual pleasure or extreme penance are intentions. Be at peace with the middle path for achieving liberation of body and mind. Siddhartha sat in cultivation beneath the Bodhi tree. Alone, he confronted the tortuous assailants from Mara's evil hordes. The earth is my witness. At that instant, Siddhartha was in complete tranquility and perfect emptiness. He was enlightened, and he became the all sentient beings exist in the Buddha nature, but it is suppressed by fixation and delusion. I wish to be humble. I am not enslaved by fame and wealth. I have come to spread the Dharma, to free all sentient beings from the sea of samsara. Your Majesty, as a king, you should love your people as your own children. A king should not oppress the people. Life should be valued equally, as nothing is more honorable than life itself. Whatever the hierarchy, every person has an inner self that can shine forth. Buddha, please let go of me. I am dirty. Niti, we should not look down upon ourselves. One does not become distinguished by one's birth, but by one's behavior. You clear the dirt from people's homes. I clear the dirt from people's hearts. Hence, you and I are the same. Please rise. Rahula, is the water in this basin drinkable?
Of course not.
You are just like the water in this basin, essentially clean, but as you persistently tell lies, you become tainted. No one will cherish you. Aniruddha, let me do the sowing for you. Neither the disciples nor the sentient beings have I ever considered as mine. I am but just a member of the Sangha.
Sit under a withered tree exposed to the sun. Please go into the shade.
The shelter of your own plant is far better shade than that of any tree. Your Majesty, can you not feel it? Since enlightenment, I've shown you the noble eightfold path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. I have never wearied of teaching the Dharma.
The Buddha was born in the palace. While still in his youth, he became the monk. He attained enlightenment under a Bodhi tree. At the age of 80, between a pair of Sana trees, the Buddha entered Nirvana. I have delivered all the sentient beings I could, and have planted the seed of deliverance for those who have yet to be delivered. Let the precepts be your teacher, and my teachings your guide, and I will be with you forever.
I hope you have enjoyed this clip. It captures the compassion and courage of the Buddha in his mission to lead sentient beings out of suffering and towards peace and happiness. Let us now walk through the Buddha's life in a little bit more detail. The Buddha was born some 2600 years ago in the northern Indian kingdom of Kapilavastu as Prince Siddhartha Gautama, son of King Suddhodana. Gautama is the family name, and Siddhartha, the personal name, means he who attains his goal. He belonged to the Sakya tribe. Sakya means able and powerful person, perhaps indicating that the tribe held power in the region. The designation Buddha is a Sanskrit word meaning the enlightened one, or to understand. Buddha is not a proper noun in a sense, rather an honorary title referring to one who has awakened to the highest universal truth of reality. This implies that everyone has the potential in becoming the Buddha, as long as one strives. In referring specifically to the Buddha of our historical era, the designation Sakyamuni Buddha is used. Sakyamuni means sage of the Sakyas. And according to Buddhist tradition, there have been countless Buddhas since beginningless time, though only one Buddha appears at any one time. Because of this, we should see the designation Buddha as a reference to a quality of being, not an individual person. The distinguishing features of a Buddha are complete liberation of oneself from the shackles of rebirth based on one's innate wisdom and perfected practice of the Dharma. It is also success in teaching the path of Buddhahood to sentient beings for the purpose of liberating them. Growing up as a young prince at a time of economic boom and cultural and urban sprawl, Siddhartha aced through schooling and learnt the ways of the noble. Life inside the palace meant he could have everything he desired, including the power to reign over his kingdom. Despite living in the lap of luxury, he instead drew his attention to the forces of impermanence experienced in life and society, such as the significant issues of suffering caused by birth, old age, sickness, and death. He also saw the inequalities of oppression of power, wealth disparity, and how the weak were preyed upon by the strong. All these signs of suffering and inequality witnessed outside the palace gates left him perturbed and perplexed. Becoming more and more contemplative and preoccupied with the problems of human existence, Prince Siddhartha altruistically set out to seek the answers to the problems ultimately for the betterment of his people. It is worthy to note that at this point in history, there were already many thinkers and religious leaders who had influence on society, though many of their doctrines were unable to lead people to liberation from suffering. According to the Samanaphala Sutra, there were 62 different schools of thought, though 6 were most prominent. And they had all different types of understandings of reality. So we had people who believed in amoralism, who deny any reward or punishment for either good or bad deeds. We also had those who believed in fatalism, believing that all beings are powerless and that suffering is predestined. We also had people who were materialists, those who believed that we need to live happily because life ends with death and everything is annihilated. So people like this live YOLO, you only live once. And then you have people who believe in eternalism. And these people believe that matter, pleasure, pain, and the soul are eternal and do not interact with one another. At this point in time in history, Jainism also was flourishing, and Jainism was about heavy restraint which is able to cleanse ourselves of all the evils and avoid evil at the same time. So it's all about heavy restraint. And then we also have agnostic thinkers who believe in suspension of judgment until we are able to verify clearly a said truth. Are the above modes of thought prevalent in today's society? If we just look around us, we can see that a lot of thinkers of the modern day are actually quite similar to those in the past, and especially during the time of the Buddha. So Prince Siddhartha knew that the answer did not lie in the above teachers. And renouncing the life of luxury, Prince Siddhartha left the palace in search of a teacher who would guide him to his answers. After learning meditation under two yogis, the prince realized that the meditation practiced was only good enough to still the mind, though the underlying cause of all human existence and the problems related to it had not been addressed. From a Buddhist perspective, the underlying cause of all dissatisfaction is the erroneous understanding of self. And before enlightenment, all beings are trapped in the delusion that the self is more substantial than it really is. This has far-reaching implications on our actions of body, speech, and mind as we do things that accord and agree with this sense of I, many a times to the detriment of ourselves and others. More on this will be dealt with in later sessions in detail. Unsatisfied with the teachings of the two yogis, the prince set out to find his own answers and solutions to human suffering. Turning to asceticism, Prince Siddhartha made the vow to carry out austerities to the very limit and began engaging in extreme practices of living off one sesame seed or 1 grain of rice per day, and even fasted completely. At one time, when he had entered meditation of stopping the breath, he was racked with severe pain and lost consciousness, collapsing. After years of austerities, the Buddha had become so emaciated, he was reduced to skin and bones. As time went by, the prince realized that austerity still offered no passage into the world of truth, neither were there sufficient methods of liberating living beings. When he had also come to understand was that while satisfaction had come from the constraints created by attachment and desire, the path of austerity offered no peace either. Ultimately, spiritual cultivation does not have to be done by torturing one's body. Thus, he rose from his seat, resolving to search for alternative ways. After abandoning austerities and regaining strength, the prince made his way to Bodh Gaya, took a seat beneath the Bodhi tree, and made a vow. I shall never relinquish this seat until enlightenment is attained. Throughout the process of meditative concentration, Siddhartha experienced an endless array of afflictions, from the external temptations of fame and gain to the internal unrest caused by greed, anger, and ignorance. He nevertheless confronted them all with fortitude. Finally came the 8th day of the 12th lunar month, when the stars and moon were shining at their brightest. Siddhartha became enlightened. He awakened to the truth of dependent origination and realized that all sentient beings possess the wisdom and virtue of the Buddha. It is only through delusions and attachments that they have shielded themselves from it. Dependent origination means that things exist when supporting causes and conditions are present, and things dissipate when they are absent or lacking. More on this will be covered in subsequent sessions. After enlightenment, the Buddha continued meditating and contemplating on the truth he had awakened to for a further 7 weeks. Realizing that myriad beings are trapped in delusion and in need of access to the truth leading to liberation, the Buddha gave rise to the intention to teach the Dharma. The Buddha spent 49 years teaching countless people the truth that he had awakened to, liberating many people from suffering in the process. Those who crossed paths with the Buddha and took refuge under him included the nobility, scholars, religious practitioners, warriors, merchants, tradespeople, laborers, children, wives, husbands, and even those whom society had disowned. Buddhism had been taught by the Buddha to the human world for the purpose of helping people resolve their difficulties in life. Everything that the Buddha had ever taught serves the purpose of discovering happiness and peace in this world, while showing the path to eternal freedom from suffering for self and others. The universal truth of reality that the Buddha awakened to is referred to as Dharma. The importance of the Dharma lies in the fact that it is the realization and complete practice of the Dharma that gives birth to Buddhas, and that the Dharma is the cornerstone of the Sangha. The Dharma can be categorized into this worldly, conventional truths and otherworldly, ultimate truths. The Buddha was able to guide sentient beings through harmonizing the ultimate and conventional truths, using both real and provisional teachings. Upon enlightenment, the Buddha realized that the truth of dependent origination was too profound for sentient beings. Instead, he taught the Four Noble Truths, which brings the focus of dependent origination onto the human condition. They are the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. As suffering was more easily relatable, the Buddha began his teachings with it. He then proceeded with teaching the cause of suffering to inspire others to seek the end of suffering. For the motivated audience, the Buddha would speak of the complete cessation of suffering, or nirvana, followed by a discourse on the path that aligns one's actions of body, speech, and mind towards nirvana. This path of cultivation consists of many teachings, though holistic Buddhist practice consists of 3 parts: the training in morality, the training in meditation, and the training in wisdom. Apart from dependent origination and the Four Noble Truths, teachings include the 3 Dharma Seals, the 12 Links of Dependent Origination, as well as teachings on the practices of remorse, gratitude, appreciation, building affinities, generosity, equality, loving kindness, compassion, and so on. Enlightenment was only possible for the Buddha because he achieved and completed these practices. This is why the Buddha instructed us as thus: to hold the Dharma as the most honored and treasured of the Triple Gem. This is why the Buddha instructed us to hold the Dharma as the most honored and treasured of the Triple Gem. The Dharma was what the Buddha relied on to achieve Buddhahood, and what he proceeded to teach sentient beings. Consequently, as long as one practices according to the Dharma, Buddhahood will inevitably be achieved one day. The Sangha refers originally to the very first few disciples of the Buddha. However, the term came to encompass the entire monastic community. When we speak of the Sangha, we do not refer to a particular individual. Rather, we refer to the community in harmony. This harmony, which is a central notion in the formation of the community, is maintained by the collective upholding of moral guidelines set by the Buddha in a teaching called the Vinaya, which is based on the spirit of mutual respect, non-violation, purity of body, speech, and mind. In particular, to meet the needs of daily life, the Buddha established a set of regulations for the community called the 6 points of reverent harmony. Number 1, harmony in view through sharing the same understanding, such that there is a common point of view. Number 2, moral harmony through sharing the same precepts, such that everyone is subject to the same regulations. Number 3, economic harmony through sharing material things and benefits equally. Number 4, mental harmony through shared happiness, through a common commitment to the way. Number 5, verbal harmony through avoiding disputes by using kindness in one's speech. Number 6, physical harmony through living together such that everyone gets along happily and does not violate one another. Under these references for living and practicing together, the Sangha or community is upheld in stability, and the Sangha becomes the embodiment of the Dharma. The Sangha bears the responsibility of upholding the true Dharma through the actualization and realization of it in their everyday lives, being a role model of the ideal Buddhist practitioner for the laity, as well as for the teaching of the Dharma and continuing the legacy of the Buddha. As such, the Sangha are seen as the caretakers of the Dharma and an important reference point for lay Buddhists. Only when the pure precepts are upheld does the Sangha exist. Only when there is a Sangha can the true Dharma be maintained and taught. In hindsight, if the Buddha did not awaken to the universal truth of the universe and compassionately teach the Dharma to the world, it would be unlikely that the Dharma will be known as it is. Such a causal relationship between each of the triple gem illustrates the mutual importance of each gem and suggests the importance of taking refuge in all the 3 gems collectively. As for the reason why the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are called gems, while worldly treasures make life more comfortable, the triple gem is a spiritual treasure that brings peace, happiness, liberation, and ease in this life and beyond. The Buddha, the omniscient great doctor, diagnoses the ills of humanity, prescribing the Dharma, the vast array of medications to treat the sufferings of human existence, while the Sangha, the carers, help administer the medicine to treat the sick. As such, the triple gem collectively provide protection from the dangers pertinent to human existence and beyond, and are a very reliable object of refuge. To truly take refuge in the triple gem, one begins with taking refuge in the original triple gem, then advances to the abiding triple gem, and lastly takes refuge in the intrinsic triple gem. The original triple gem consists of the historical Sakyamuni Buddha, the doctrines directly spoken by the Buddha, such as the 4 Noble Truths, dependent origination, the Eightfold Path, and so on, and the initial Sangha during the Buddha's time. The ever-abiding triple gem refers to Buddhist statues we find at Buddhist monasteries and temples, the sutras we read and chant, and the present-day Sangha of Buddhist monks and nuns. The intrinsic triple gem refers to our Buddha nature, or in other words, the potentiality to become Buddhas. The Dharma nature that is in accord with the truth of reality, and Shila, our innate wish for harmony and purity. When the Buddha attained perfect enlightenment, he proclaimed, "Marvelous, marvelous! All sentient beings have the Tathagata's wisdom and virtue, but they fail to realize it because they cling to deluded thoughts and attachments." Tathagata is an epithet of the Buddha, literally meaning one who has thus come, referring to one who has transcended the dualities of coming and going, though it comes for the sake of delivering sentient beings. This tells us that we innately already possess the nature of the Buddha, and only need to work through our own delusions, defilements, and unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind before our Buddha natures are revealed. The same is true for our intrinsic Dharma and Sangha gem. As we take refuge in the intrinsic triple gem, we are affirming our potentiality to become just like the Buddha and take responsibility for our own liberation. Thus, by taking refuge in the triple gem, one takes refuge in oneself. Although taking refuge in the triple gem itself does not constrain one to the precepts, a sense of faith is itself a precept. Faith represents one's mind and character, which should never be infringed upon. It is to practice self-discipline and self-respect through following the Buddha's teachings on basic human morality and to uphold fundamental values of ethics. So far, we have discussed what taking refuge entails. It is perhaps worthwhile to also make mention of the erroneous understandings of taking refuge, lest we deviate from the true meaning. Though we take refuge in the Buddha as the great teacher who has shown us the path to liberation from suffering, we do not see the Buddha as an omnipotent God who grants our wishes in exchange for worship. The saying, "Rely on the self, rely on the Dharma, and rely on nothing else," indicates that the objects of our refuge should be none other than our Buddha natures and the Dharma. Everyone has the Buddha nature within. As long as we have faith in ourselves and recognize our fundamental nature of Buddhahood, we are freed from the restraints of divine power. This said, we continue to take the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha as our refuge, our guide, and a point of reference for our own practice. To take refuge in the Dharma is to rely on the truth. In other words, it is to rely on the teachings and not on an individual teacher as such. When we can understand this, we prevent being blindsided by emotions, interpersonal relationships, and gossip. And taking refuge in the Dharma enables us to view the world with equality by perceiving all phenomena as such. Even if Buddhahood is not achieved, we will still have cultivated a mind of equality and will have transcended worldly opposition and conflicts. One does not take refuge to venerate a specific master, but to establish and affirm one's faith in the Buddha's teachings by formally becoming a Buddhist of correct faith. Therefore, Sakyamuni Buddha is the fundamental teacher in which one takes refuge in. A monastic who claims to be an object of refuge or a master to be revered in a refuge ceremony is oblivious to the Buddha-Dharma and ineligible to teach. Venerable Master Xing Yun explains that the Buddha is like the light that nurtures all beings. Light shines, warms, and allows life to mature. Light drives away darkness and fear. Sunlight brings warmth and allows plants to grow. Similarly, the Buddha's light illuminates the mind. Taking refuge in the Buddha is like building a power station in one's mind that continuously generates wholesome qualities of loving kindness, wisdom, and faith. The Dharma is like the water that nourishes all beings. Water cleanses, eradicating defilements and karmic hindrances. Water quenches thirst and allows plants to thrive, thus enabling one's well-being and growth. Taking refuge in the Dharma is like building a waterworks in one's mind that nourishes the body and mind, cleansing away afflictions and defilements. The Sangha is like a field, enabling the planting of merit and virtue. The Sangha is a teacher and a wholesome friend. Taking refuge in the Sangha is like owning many fields over which crops can grow into bountiful harvests. In wrapping up, taking refuge in the Triple Gem provides safety and protection from the dangers pertinent to the 21st century. The danger of suffering is a reactive mental state caused by our erroneous understanding of the I and ego. The Buddha, the omniscient great doctor, diagnoses the ills of humanity, prescribing the Dharma, the vast array of medicines to treat the sufferings of human existence, while the Sangha, the carers, help administer the medicine to treat the sick. As such, the Triple Gem are collectively embraced as reliable objects of refuge. I hope that you have found this session to be of help to your spiritual journey. Please stay tuned for next week's session on the process of internalizing the Triple Gem. In the meantime, please take care and stay safe. May you be blessed with the protection of the Triple Gem. Amitofo.